While others look at a graveyard and get chills down their spine, I see it as a place of peace and quiet reflection. That was before tonight, before I learned the truth beneath the surface. I work for Hemlock Hill Cemetery, one of the oldest and largest graveyards in North America. There are over 100,000 graves here, some dating back to the 1700s. There is real history here, both above and below the ground. But even the mighty have limits, and the cemetery is running out of space, leaving only a small section near the back for new burials. I was assigned to dig the grave for one of our last residents. The man had been well liked and respected in the community. He was a giant, over 6'5" and well over 300 pounds. His casket was bigger than some cars, so a standard 6-foot grave wasn't going to cut it. If I was going to bury this man, it would be with kindness and dignity, in a grave worthy of his size and presence. We had been in the grip of a record August heat wave, so digging during the day would have been a death sentence of its own. I chose to work at night, when the air was at least tolerable, though I was still sweating through my shirt just operating the tractor. Once I had dug a hole deep enough for the casket, I decided to take a break before tackling the shovel work. I pulled out my cigarettes and lit one up, but almost immediately I had the strangest sensation, like someone was watching me. I scanned the cemetery, but there wasn't a soul in sight, just me and my freshly departed client. My gaze drifted to the oversized casket, and for a moment I could have sworn the eyes I felt were coming from inside of that. I looked down at my cigarette and chuckled. Hey, don't judge me. I'm not the one in the box. We all end up in a hole someday, so what does it matter if I get there a little faster? I flicked away the last of my smoke and took a swig of water. My eyes went back to the casket. I see you're in a hurry to get into your new home, my friend. Let me finish it up for you real quick. I tossed my work shirt onto the ground near the tractor. Even at night, it was far too hot for extra layers. I placed my ladder at the edge of the grave and set up a floodlight to illuminate the dig site. Then I grabbed my shovel and began the slow descent into the hole. Bit by bit, I carved out a deep, clean square. It was the deepest grave I'd ever dug, and I felt a flicker of pride. Then my worst fear came true. When I drove my shovel into the center, it hit a pocket of loose soil, and before I could react, the ground beneath me gave way. The collapse was as fast as a landslide. I'd heard of this happening during archaeological digs. It often ended in tragedy. The dirt around my feet began breaking apart, and I went into a full panic. I jammed my shovel into the wall of the hole to steady myself, but the soil there gave way too. In seconds, I was in a full-blown cave-in. I screamed and clawed at the earth as it closed in around me. The more I struggled, the looser the dirt became. With one final groan, the earth swallowed me whole. The last thing I saw before hitting bottom was my floodlight tumbling from its perch and shattering, plunging me into total darkness. I landed hard. The wind knocked out of me, but a mound of loose earth cushioned the blow just enough to keep my back from breaking. Dirt poured down in dusty ribbons, pattering across my face and chest, stealing what little breath I had left. One irony of my profession is that I've always feared being buried alive above all else. And now, on this moonless night, my worst fear had come true. By some miracle, the cave-in stopped before it smothered me completely. The good news, I hadn't been buried alive. The bad news, I was now trapped several feet below the surface in the most remote part of the cemetery, with no one around for miles. No, I'll be fine. I'll just call for help. I patted my chest and froze. No phone. The comforting shape of it was missing. Then I remembered. It was in the zipped pocket of my work shirt, the one I'd taken off and tossed by the tractor to keep the sweat and dirt off it. Now it was several feet above me, as unreachable as the moon. Despite the oppressive heat, a shiver ran through me. I'll just have to climb out, carefully. I reached for the dirt wall, my fingers sinking into the loose soil. Trying to get a grip was like trying to wrestle water. Every handful crumbled away, spilling between my fingers, like sand in an hourglass. My mind supplied, in a voice that wasn't quite mine. How many falling grains do you think you have left? I shook my head hard. No, I'm getting out of here. I dug my fingers into the wall and hauled myself upward. My reward was a fresh cascade of earth raining down from above. I flinched, half expecting to be buried again, but the collapse stopped quickly. My chest tightened. Climbing out would only bring more dirt down on me, and next time it might not stop. Trapped in one of your finest graves, the voice sneered. How's that for irony? Did you dig this one for yourself? I clapped my hands over my ears and shook my head violently. Shut up. I'm going to be fine. It's only a few hours until morning. Someone will see the equipment and call for help. The voice laughed, a slow, knowing chuckle. It's the weekend. No one's coming for days. You have no family waiting. You're alone down here, and you'll die alone. My heart pounded in my chest like a jackhammer. The awful truth of it gnawed at me. No one was expecting me home tonight. Maybe not for days. I slapped myself, desperate to drive out the thoughts. Calm down. You can do this. The human body can go days without water or food. I just need to wait it out. That's all. I nodded, as if trying to convince myself, but my inner demon wasn't buying it. Sure, under normal conditions, but this is an August heat wave, underground. That sun will be up soon, and it'll bake you like a can of beans. And isn't it sad, knowing there's water sitting in that bottle right above your head? Water you'll never taste. I bit back tears. Crying would only waste precious moisture. Screaming or pounding the walls would waste strength. Since when have you cared how fast or slow you die? The voice whispered. We all end up in a hole. What does it matter if you get there a little faster? This time the tears came anyway. I sobbed into the sweltering dark. I was in a literal pit of despair, with no way out. You're all alone down here, soon to be a feast for the worms. Can't you feel them in the dark, wriggling through the soil, wriggling into you? God help me, I could feel them. Within seconds, they were pouring out of the soil, millions of them, sliding over my boots, my legs, my chest. Cold, wet bodies squirming across my skin, writhing toward my face. I could feel their slick bodies sliding across my skin, cold and alive in the smothering dark. And they weren't alone. Oh no. Out of the cracks in the earth came every crawling nightmare I'd ever imagined. Spiders skittering across my arms, centipedes twisting around my legs, unseen legs and mandibles brushing over my neck. A strangled scream ripped out of me. I slapped at my body, desperate to knock them off, and that's when I felt it. My hand smacked against my thigh, and there it was, the one shred of hope in this hellhole. My Zippo. My fingers closed around it like a lifeline. In seconds, a golden flame blossomed in the dark, spilling warm light across the walls and banishing the swarm. The crawlers, whether real or just the products of my unraveling mind, were gone. Hope flared in my chest. For a moment, I understood how the first humans must have felt when they tamed fire. A simple light, yet it held back the abyss. What now, demon voice? I muttered. Going to ruin this too? For the first time, it had nothing to say. I leaned back, letting the flames glow steady me. Then I lifted it higher, casting light around the space. To my surprise, the illumination reached farther than I expected. In one corner, the dirt sloped upward into a narrow arc. I crawled toward it and found another arc beyond it, and another. My heart quickened. This wasn't just a collapse pocket in the soil. These were tunnels, a whole network of them, catacombs. The spaces were too large for burrowing animals to have made them. Natural? Maybe. But beneath a cemetery? I pushed forward, my flame throwing shadows along the curves of the tunnels, until something ahead caught the light. A faint gleam in the dark. My mind went straight to the worst. Eyes watching me. Or scales waiting to strike. The old childlike fear returned, telling me to turn back. I forced myself forward. The gleam resolved into something familiar. Wood. Rich, polished cherry wood. My stomach sank. I knew that grain, that coffin. It was Mr. Tillman's casket, a man I had buried only weeks ago in Bakersfield. Somehow, it had fallen straight through the earth. A heavy sadness came over me. I had put him to rest. Seeing his grave disturbed was like a personal failure. I placed my hand on the lid. "I'm sorry, Mr. Tillman. We'll fix this." But when I opened it, my breath turned to ice. The body was gone. I stumbled back, scanning the soil for any sign of him. Loose dirt, fabric, bone. But there was nothing. He couldn't have decomposed this fast. Impossible. I checked the casket again, half hoping my panic had tricked me. No. All that remained were a few torn strips of his burial suit. Fear clawed up my spine, but so did an idea. "I'm sorry for this," I whispered. I tore a splintered piece from the damaged coffin and wrap the suit scraps around it. A quick flip of my Zippo, and I had a makeshift torch. I carried it deeper into the arches, only to find my worst fear. The torchlight revealed more caskets, dozens of them, ones I had buried over the past few months. Every lid was forced open. Some hung crooked from shattered hinges. In each casket I could see into, the body was gone. Completely gone. What could have done this? I breathed. Battling. The voice in my head spoke slowly this time, almost reluctantly, as if it feared the very name it uttered. I didn't know the word, yet it felt disturbingly familiar. I stepped closer to one coffin and nudged the lid aside. Inside, the wood was scarred with deep, ragged claw marks, longer and sharper than anything human. Battling, the voice repeated. I didn't know what had left those marks, and every instinct told me I didn't want to. But somewhere in these tunnels, there had to be a way out. It was my only shred of hope, so I had to keep going. I crawled for what felt like miles, my elbows raw against the packed earth. The further I went, the more questions surfaced. What carved these tunnels? Did they stretch beneath the whole cemetery? The county? The country? But two questions gnawed harder than the rest. What had taken those bodies, and why? These passages were far too intricate for organ thieves, and too elaborate even for the depraved appetites of necrophiles. Why go to this much effort instead of simply digging from above? The question you should be asking, the voice murmured, is what left those claw marks? I ignored it. Some questions deserved no answer. Not now. Maybe not ever. The ground began to slope downward, which unsettled me. I wanted to climb toward the surface, not sink deeper. Still, I pressed on. With each yard, the air grew hotter, the close walls beating with sweat from my skin. And then, an odor, unpleasant, yet horribly familiar. Every gravedigger, every mortician knows it. The scent of decay. I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer that I was wrong. But the further I crawled, the more overpowering it became, until breathing felt like swallowing rot. That was when a new sound reached me. Soft, deliberate. A long, wet tearing, like cardboard being ripped after soaking in water. Beneath it, a faint squelch, as though the sound were happening inside something alive. I froze. Go back to the grave, now, before it's too late. This time the voice didn't sound mocking. It sounded afraid, almost protective. For a moment, I wanted to obey, but I doubted I could retrace my path, even if I tried. The only way was forward, no matter how cold my bones felt. Something moved ahead. My hands shook as I lifted the torch. The small flame caught on pale motion, and my breath lodged in my throat. The creature stood hunched in the light, its form a grotesque parody of humanity. Skin so white it looked powdered with bone dust, as though it had never once felt the sun. Bat-like ears flared from the sides of its narrow skull. Its face was all ridges and hard angles, as if spikes were straining to break through. Its eyes were milk white, sightless, but still seemed to fix on me. It wore black rags, shredded and dirt-caked, but in the tatters I recognized slashes of white cloth, a funeral suit. My stomach lurched. Its hands were sheathed in long, close-bound claws, like a badger's, made for digging. Along its forearms, strips I took for torn cloth revealed themselves to be leathery wings. The joints fused grotesquely to the limbs. It was feeding. In its claws was what remained of Mr. Tillman. The creature raised one hand and with a single motion severed a leg. That sudden tearing filled the tunnel again. Then its jaw unhinged, revealing row after row of razor teeth, and it pushed the limb into its mouth as though swallowing rope. There was no gag, no pause, just smooth, obscene consumption. When the limb vanished entirely, the jaw clicked shut and it reached for the next piece. "Told you to go back," the voice whispered. It didn't sound like it was in my head anymore. Rebelling. That voice inside my head whispered again, and suddenly everything became clear. I knew exactly what I was looking at. My grandmother grew up in the Philippines, and she'd often tell me stories from her homeland. The one that had terrified me the most as a child was about the Berbalang, a ghoul that didn't hunt the living, but the dead. It was immortal, feeding mostly on corpses. When desperate, it would settle for the living. How long had this thing been down here, beneath our feet? How many offerings had I unknowingly lowered into its jaws? How many centuries had we been supplying it with an endless feast of the dead? But that feast was nearly over. The cemetery was full. Soon the corpses would stop coming. Would it go looking for fresher meat then? And had I just given it the perfect tunnel to escape into the night? The thought hit me like ice water, and I gasped. The sound carried. The creature froze mid-bite, sniffing the air. No, I told myself. It can't smell me, not with all this stench of decay. I prayed I was right. It stepped forward, feeling the ground with long, clawed toes, each movement deliberate. Its head was now only inches from me. I forced myself not to breathe. Then, slowly, it cocked its head in an eerily human way, like a child curious about a bug. Without warning, its head shot forward and it let out a shriek that made my skull vibrate. How had I not considered this? With that single scream, it knew exactly where I was. It lunged. I swung my torch, smashing the flames into its face. It recoiled, thrashing at the fire. I didn't wait to see if it would put them out. I ran. The fading light barely showed the tunnel arches ahead, and soon I was relying entirely on instinct to find my way back. Another shriek split the darkness, followed by the pounding rhythm of pursuit. This was its territory, its hunting ground. It had the advantage. I swerved around the arches, refusing to run in a straight line. Then, out of nowhere, a screech tore through the air. and white-hot pain slashed through the back of my calf. It had caught me, but only with a glancing blow. I kicked backward and felt my heel crunch into its horny face. I limped onward as it recovered, knowing I had only one chance left. Through the gloom, I spotted the faintest hint of pale pre-dawn light. The chamber I'd entered. I reached the open grave above me and turned to face the darkness. The sound of the Berbelling's approach echoed like a drumbeat in my chest. "Come on!" I shouted into the cavern. "I won't let you hurt anyone again." I looked up at the deep navy of the early sky. What I wouldn't give to feel one last evening breeze. But this was my end, and I would make it count. A gravedigger learns one thing really well. We all end up in a hole someday. So what did it matter if I got there a little sooner? The Berbelling erupted from the shadows, claws gleaming in the first light, ready to tear me apart. I slammed both fists into the fragile walls around us. The earth shuddered and dirt rained down. Then I lunged forward, wrapping my arms around the creature. Using the strength forged from digging 100 graves, I locked the demon to my body and drove us both to the ground. Above us, dirt and rock cascaded in a suffocating torrent, sealing us beneath its crushing weight. The pressure drove into my chest, my lungs filled with grit and earth. Darkness flooded in. My inevitability had finally come, and I could feel myself slipping into whatever comes next. But through the haze, I felt it. The Berbelling's heart, steady and unyielding. It had survived the collapse. It waited, patient like a spider in its web. I could only hope that my body would serve as its coffin long enough for it to starve. I could only hope.